Welcome to BCM241 Media Ethnographies. I wanted to put together a really quick FAQ answering some of the questions that I've got via the tutors, via Discord, and via Twitter with regards to the specifics of the pitch presentation and also the submission of the blogs this week. So I'm going to go from kind of the general to the specific and hopefully kind of answer as many questions as I can and anticipate some of the questions that you might have. And we'll talk about that as we get through this. All right, so just quickly, what you're doing for your major research project is you are researching your experience. You are researching your experience of a media niche through observation and autoethnography. And so I keep saying this a lot, we're not very interested in the text itself. Obviously, the text or the site or whatever it is that you're researching is going to be part of your narrative. It's going to be part of your description, but it is not the key thing that we're interested in. So the purpose of the first blog post was to choose a field site, choose an area, a media niche that you want to investigate, that you want to research, that either you know a lot about or you want to find out more about. And you're going to investigate this media niche. You're going to investigate the experience of this media niche by recording observations. So I made a note here. I was thinking, okay, so you've got your pitch coming up. You could be recording observations and doing analysis in week 7 and 8, and there's no lectures in week 9. Then you've got the 2-week mid-session break where you could put together your artifact. You could be submitting your major project in week 10. I've very much designed this subject with that in mind so that you have other major projects and other subjects that you could work on in weeks 11, 12, and 13, right? So you could, if you were ambitious enough, you could totally finish up the subject by week 10. When you're recording observations, we're really interested in the details. Now, a lot of you in your second blog post in mapping your field site really didn't quite connect or make the interconnections between the elements and the field site, right? So you had social media over here and you had brands over here. You weren't connecting those two. And so you need to think about that. You were also, maybe some of you had, the kind of technical, so you were thinking about podcasts, right? So maybe you included the podcast app, but you weren't thinking about your phones. You weren't thinking about where you were in your life at, the physical location about where you were consuming that podcast. Details are important. You're going to be creating new knowledge based on observations of experience. So details about the technology, about the time, the place, the experience, your emotional state are just as important as doing further background research about what others are saying about your media niche. So you're going to be collecting information. Now, this is really important. This data is going to go in your research report, and you want to show evidence of, this is the third blog post, right? You're setting out your schedule. So in week 7, I'm going to sit down for an hour and I'm going to explore the graphical user interface of Netflix. I'm going to look at its dynamics. I'm going to look at how it's organized. I'm going to look at its fonts. I'm going to look at the resolution of the animated images. I'm going to look at how annoying their autoplay feature is. I'm going to look at the settings, right? So you're really digging deep into the specificity of the experience of that media platform. And then, then you're going to have this rich data, right? So what are you going to do with that data? Well, this is where the kind of third blog post and the fourth blog post come into the frame. This is where you start to problematize, right? You've got all this data, you've got all this information. What is interesting about this information? What am I going to leave behind and what am I going to take forward into my digital artifact and my research report? This is where, and I'm going to quote Susan here, right? The idea of problematizing isn't necessarily finding a problem with the thing, right? It doesn't have to be negative. Problematizing is simply taking an experience, taking a platform, taking a thing, and turning it around, trying to see the media niche, trying to see the technology, the practice, the platform, the production, or whatever it is from a different perspective based on your observations, trying to better understand some aspect of the media niche. And so you don't be afraid to focus in. Don't be afraid, once you've got all this data, to pick out key moments and key elements that you want to focus in. And then that's where your theoretical paradigm comes in. That's where your analytical framework comes in, because you've got this data and now you're going to pass this data through your theoretical paradigm. For example, I was talking to one student on Discord, and they were talking about their project, and they were talking about their theoretical paradigm that was going to be comprised of concepts from feminism, right? So thinking about representation, thinking about politics, thinking about equality. 3 great concepts with which to look at the media niche. And I think it was sex positivity on Instagram. So you've got the data, you've got the paradigm, and then you create this analysis based on the data. I've got lots of post-it notes. I had another example. So I was talking to someone on Twitter, and they were looking at TikTok. So they were going to analyze their observations of TikTok, and we were talking about, well, what are some of the current issues surrounding TikTok? Well, there's an enormous amount of politics going on. And some of that politics is cultural. Some of that politics is formally political in terms of the US ban. Some of that politics is actually economics, because Facebook has an interest in TikTok being banned. And so then we were starting to develop an analytical framework around thinking about maybe digging into some of the reasons why TikTok was being seen as a problem. Is it racism? Is it economics? Is it political gesturing? All right. Another example was we had a student who was talking about doing online shopping, and so she was having trouble writing her 4th blog post. It's like, what are the ethical problems of online shopping? That doesn't seem very bad. Well, I'm like, well, actually, there's a huge environmental cost associated with fashion. Fashion is trying to make clothes out of date as quickly as possible in order to sell you more clothes. The shipping is one of the biggest polluters, thanks to the type of fuel that they use. Some fabrics, like denim, have an enormous cost environmentally because of the dyes that they use, the enormous amount of water that goes into preparing denim and making it soft. Then there's labor problems. Can you purchase ethically online with stores that are providing a good wage to their workers? So the ethics isn't just about, and I'm sure I should get to that. Let me get to that. Come back to ethics, because I just want to move on to this point. Mohammed was saying that some of the students felt intimidated by the number of readings, and I was like, okay, but I'm sure I said this in the lecture. The readings are resources. Like, we're not testing you on your knowledge of the readings. The readings are there because they help you figure out how to problematize. They help you to figure out how to create an analytical framework. They're just resources there for you to use. Jump into them, have a bit of a look around. You don't have to read from start to finish. The technical term is have a squiz, right? And check them out. And then you go to the bibliographies and the reference list, right? And they'll point you on to further resources. I'm not testing you on the knowledge there. It's just there for your learning. So jump in if you want. If you don't, move on. No worries. Okay, let's move on. Right. So the fourth blog post is all about the ethics and the intellectual property and some of the bigger problems associated with doing this kind of research. And I had a student say, "Oh, I'm just looking at the media coverage of rugby league," and I'm like, "Well," and he said that there's no ethical issues associated there because it's all published, right? All of these radio shows, all these podcasts. I'm not looking at social media. There's no ethical issues. And I'm like, hey, well, actually, rugby league has a pretty dodgy history when it comes to personal relationships with women. And that's covered very extensively in the media. So, if you're doing research on this field site, not so much the field of rugby league, but the broader media experience of rugby league, you've got to take on some of these issues and start to think about the ethical considerations there. A big one, and I saw a student, I wish I could remember, she tweeted now, but she was actually engaged in this idea of true crime. So I have a big problem with true crime. Massive fan of fictional crime, big fan of Sherlock Holmes, Enola Holmes coming out on Netflix end of September. Very keen for that. But I get concerned about true crime. And I had this same problem when I was working as a journalist and was being asked to do court reporting. I had major issues with this because you are entering into a situation in which there are real victims of crime. And I know the Journalist Code of Ethics says, well, you have to, treat this with respect. And, that the public has a right to know. And I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't feel comfortable in interjecting myself into the tragedies of people's lives. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't feel comfortable. This is my kind of personal ethical consideration about true crime. And so, what does it mean to, sell true crime books and to have a really popular true crime podcast? You have to ask the question, are you profiting or are you benefiting from the tragedies in these people's lives? Now, how you reconcile that is totally fine. I'm just problematizing, right, the ethical considerations around that media field site. So that media niche, right? So I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm just twisting it around and saying, okay, maybe we should think about this. And what do we get out of it if we think about that carefully? So this is where we kind of have to draw the line in the research between what we consider to be published and what we consider to be shared. And I unpack this in the lecture in week 4 a little bit. That when people publish a blog post, publish a YouTube video, publish a podcast or a TV show or a book, the notion of publishing is to put it out into public. And so there is a reasonable expectation that people will engage with it. People will critique it. People will satire it. People will copy small amounts of it for the purposes of education, review, and so on. And that is totally fine. You can use material that is considered to be published. That is fine. But there's a difference between publishing and sharing. When people go on Twitter, when people go on Facebook, when people go on Reddit, they know that they're putting their expression out in public. But they're not necessarily under the impression that they are giving you permission to use that expression in whatever way you see fit. And that's where the ethical line is drawn. So you don't have permission to copy someone's tweet. You don't have permission to copy someone's Facebook page. Even if you cross out their name, you don't have that permission. What you do have permission, however, is to describe your experience. So if you're researching Reddit, you can take screenshots of your work. You can take screenshots, or use elements of logos and things like that to describe the experience. And that's the thing, right? You can describe your experience. You can say, okay, I get frustrated with the Reddit interface. I don't understand the upvoting, downvoting, and how that affects the algorithm. I don't understand how the old page works or the new page works. I get frustrated with the moderation of subreddits. I get frustrated with the rules of subreddits where I need a certain amount of karma in order to post. Or I posted a piece and I had a great response. And I had some really interesting questions, particularly this question that asked about, and you can describe the question. You just can't put the question directly, right? So you are totally ethically able to report about your experience. You just can't ethically just copy and paste and chuck that into your work. And so this is the difference between ethics and intellectual property, because there's another layer of problematic to this, right? In that these social media platforms have end user license agreements and terms of service contracts where they actually have the copyright to the work that is being produced. They have an intellectual property investment in that. So if you're working outside the university and you are doing this kind of research, you don't necessarily have the right to turn that intellectual property into new types of intellectual property. So this is why we are getting you to think about these concerns. If you have any questions at all, put them in your blog. If you have any concerns at all, document. Like, say, I don't understand this. That is a totally legitimate thing to say in a blog, right? I don't quite get this, and I'm not sure why I don't get this, or I'm going to find out more about this, and so on. Okay, so when it comes to the digital artifact and the research report, you are communicating your research. You've done your observation. You've done your data collection. You've analyzed your data according to your theoretical framework, and now you are communicating. Your digital artifact is for the public, right? You are communicating your new knowledge, your new information, your insights about your field site, about your media niche, and about the new knowledge that you've generated about this through this procedure. And you're putting that into the world via an audio podcast or a video essay or some kind of creative narrative, a short story, a dramatic web series, a series of photographic image essays, whatever, your digital artifact, right? Maybe you're 3D printing something, I don't know. You can go crazy, right? Be creative and innovative and different. Or play it safe if you just want to get through, like a blog post where you have an audio cast of you reading the blog post. That's fine. Whatever. Talk to your tutor. But it's public, right? You're communicating your new information. Your research report is much more kind of formal, but not essay-like. Cover page, index, background research, academic sources, evidence of your data collection, and conclusion of your findings. We'll come back to that more in the future. I just want you to think about that. That's where you're going. Right. Pitch. Okay. I know some folks are uncertain about the pitch. Really hold the word pitch in mind, because we're not assessing your research project yet. We are assessing your ability to effectively communicate your ideas for your research project. This is where you're locking yourself in. Not 100%, but this is where you're saying, this is what I'm going to do. You've got 4 blog posts to draw on. So 90% of the work for this pitch presentation is already done. What you are trying to do is sell your ideas. You are trying to think of this as like going into a workplace or going into a client presentation where you're saying, this is what I can do. This is my field site. This is my research approach. And this is the kind of information and new knowledge that I want to generate that addresses this problem that I can see, or this issue, or create this content in new ways. Find innovation and creativity in your media niche. Spot gaps in the marketplace. It's a 2-minute video. And we're not assessing the aesthetics. You can talk to camera like this. You can record video like I'm doing using QuickTime or Windows Movie Maker or whatever. You can have a watermark. I don't care. We're not assessing the aesthetics. We're assessing your effectiveness of your communication. You record, you upload the video like I do to YouTube, and you embed that in your blog post. Now that blog post needs to be up the day before your presentation. There should be no last minute stuff, right? This is just a 2-minute video of all the research you've already done, selling your ideas, pitching your ideas with energy and affect, and convincing us that yes, you're onto something awesome and you should definitely proceed. Make sure you've gone to the Moodle site and you've added your name to the schedule of presentations. We're doing presentations in week 6 and week 7 to hopefully spread out the presentations a little bit and give us a little bit of time for question and answers. It'll be quite pressured situation, but you'll be able to manage it fine. Please check the grading rubric. The grading rubric is in the assessment materials folder at the top of the Moodle page. Please have a look at that grading rubric before you record your video. When it comes to the presentation, you're going to be in Discord. Let's see, can I bring Discord? Okay, so there we go. There is Discord. Let's scroll down to BCM241. Okay, you'll be in the voice channel, and then you just click go live. There'll be a button here that says go live, and you'll be able to share your screen. I would recommend practicing going live with someone or just by yourself. You can pop into one of the channels and just practice going live and practice sharing your screen and making sure that you can share your screen. If you are anticipating any problems about sharing your screen, please contact your tutor a week before the presentation and speak to them about having your blog post online and sharing the link. So when you start your presentation, you'll share your link in chat, you'll go live, and you'll have the blog post. So the blog post, you can put stuff that you can't fit into your video. If it's a hard 2-minute maximum. If you are 2 seconds over 2 minutes or 2 seconds, or maybe under, you can be a little bit under. But if you're over 2 minutes, this is a very workplace associated task, right? You're given 2 minutes. You're expected to hit 2 minutes. So you should practice, you should present straight to camera, and off you go. Okay, if you have any questions about the blogs, about your research project, about the presentation, please hit me up on Discord. My details for Discord are on the Moodle page on the right-hand side. It is the easiest way for me to answer questions. We can do text, and if the questions get too elaborate, I can call you and we can quickly hash it out. I've been doing this all week with students and addressing issues and addressing problems, and I'm more than happy to do that. I'm here to help you get through this subject. So thank you very much. All the best for refining your blog posts this week and getting that submitted and getting all prepared for the pitches when we are back in week 6 and week 7. Happy researching. Bye.